This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog, our YouTube channel, and our newsletter, and our great sponsors, Your Dolce Vita, Italy Rooting, and Abiativo Casa. And I have a very, very interesting guest today with a very interesting background. Something that I haven't come across yet, interviewing Italians. So, Stephanie Larimore, thanks, Stephanie, for being here, and welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited that you found it interesting enough to want to talk to me about it. And hopefully I've learned a lot from your podcast of how to research things and how to understand some of the information I'm coming across, because I'm pretty new at this research genealogy stuff. I did it earlier this year, starting with 23andMe, which is what kind of got me in the door of looking, who are these people who it says I'm related to, because I don't recognize them. And then I ended up doing Ancestry. That was better, I think, because there was more historical things to go through. The 23andMe didn't really have that kind of stuff. They were more into the, like, what your traits are for your health, like if you're likely to be a heavy sleeper and stuff like that, which I thought was like, how do you have your traits? According to your traits, you might be a heavy sleeper, or you have a hard time focusing, or something like that, which I thought that is interesting, but it wasn't as much what I was wanting to know about. So I think Ancestry is what got me down that rabbit hole of looking at census statistics, looking at some birth records, or even like crew lists, manifests of ships. I found all that really interesting. And then so I was able to talk to my dad, and because my dad, he's 77 now. He was born in 47, so he was actually made in Italy and born in the United States. My I guess should I start with first?
So just to set the stage here a little bit for everybody, your grandmother was an Italian war bride. Your grandfather was an American soldier, but he wasn't the typical American soldier now, was he?
No. He was, yeah. And it's interesting too, because I've been able to read through some stories on my Chinese side of the family, and they talk about they were really good about, like, towards the end of their lives, I think, just like telling a lot of the stories about growing up during the Depression, during the war. And some of my aunts, which were my grandfather's sisters, wrote about how James Shum joined when he was 18 the army. I think, I don't know if back then, if you joined a specific branch of the military, you just signed up for the military and they put you where they needed you, I think.
Well, you could enlist in the Army or the Navy, the Air Force. Well, there was no Air Force; it was the Army Air Corps. But it was basically, you could enlist in whatever you wanted to enlist in, unless maybe, I know during Vietnam, if they needed you someplace, it didn't matter. You got drafted, and they said you're a Marine, you're a sailor, you're Air Force, whatever they wanted to make you.
Well, I guess when he was 18, because he was born in 25.
And now was he born in the States, or was he born in China?
He was born in Chicago.
Ah.
Yeah, actually, his whole story is a whole different. If there's a Chinese podcast about his story, there'd be a great one for that, because his parents were born in China, but they were my great grandfather. Well, who I thought was my great grandfather. So during this whole thing, I found out that my great grandfather was not actually my biological great grandfather, and that my grandmother had. He traveled a lot. So the one I thought was my great grandfather was a reverend, and so he would go and travel and I guess preach, or at different churches. And so because he traveled a lot, she was in Chicago with 2 kids by herself, and the 2 kids were not even their kid together. They were both widows in China, and had daughters of their own. And then when they got married, they combined their family, obviously. He came out in 1920 to get things ready. They'd already married in China, and she came out in 1921 with the kids, to San Francisco, and then basically they just went straight to Chicago because all the Chinese people back then were going to Chicago. I don't know why. There was I guess there was a decent Chinatown area over there, and they just fit right in over there. And then so her first child was actually the father was I guess I don't know. I've heard different stories, so it's kind of hard to know who this guy was. As far as I heard, he was the one of the babysitters, but he was an orphan from China that came when he was like 17, and somehow ended up in Chicago, and somehow ended up meeting my great grandmother. They may have been, it might have been they fell in love kind of thing, but she was married, and she couldn't leave her husband, and he was too young. He was like 8 years younger than her. I'm looking for, like, you know, who is, I think, I can't really pronounce his Chinese name, but they called him Tim Shum, Reverend Tim Shum. In all the documents I can see about him, you know, from newspaper clippings and everything, because it was a big deal that he was a Chinese minister, I guess, because he was a Presbyterian. And I think that when he was in China, somebody must have been over there preaching, you know, Christianity, and converted him basically, and then somehow got him to come to the United States to go to seminary school and learn everything he needed to learn. He then went back to China, and then he came back and forth quite a bit. I didn't realize it was that. I don't know, maybe the church paid for it or something like that. So then they got to Chicago. They ended up moving like right after my grandpa was born to Oakland, and then that's pretty much the Bay Area was where they mostly grew up. Like my aunts and James and everything. My James being my grandfather. He was 18. Apparently, according to the story, the lore is that he had gotten into a fight, or because he was very mischievous. He was described as, you know, fun-loving and just always kind of getting into things, and he was I don't want to say a mama's boy, but he was mom's favorite, you know. And she I guess at some point he'd gotten into a little fight with a Chinese gang, and the guy threatened to kill him, so he was like, well, I guess I'm joining the military because the war needs me, and it's better than being here and getting killed. I'd rather get killed somewhere else. So he ended up getting shipped to I found his actually like a draft here, like from, I don't know if you can see it or not. It just says to the American Consulate General of Italy, and it just says Private First Class James H. Shum, and then a number, has a theater permit for marriage filed in his 201 file, and it says subject enlisted man was inducted on August 2nd, 1943 at San Francisco, California. So basically it's just saying, hey, he's okay, he's got a bride, and this was written in April 21st, 1947. And that's basically just before they got on the ship to come to America.
So he was still there after the war. So he was there quite a while then, I guess.
He was there for let's see, if he got 43 and this was 4 years, he was there for 4 years. But he was like 149th replacement battalion. I've tried to Google that to see if I can find pictures of that, you know, group of people. I haven't had a whole lot of luck, but he was basically in Trieste during that really crazy time after the war. And I'm still learning a lot about it, about the free territory of Trieste, and how they had to, after World War II, there was still a lot of problems in that area because it was a major seaport for trade, and Yugoslavia wanted it or was claiming it, and some, I don't know, maybe Germany, Germany Empire had it before, or whatever. They were fighting over it, and so they had to come up with like a treaty sort of thing, I guess, that and so everybody seemed to have their own people there. Every country had their own people there to help keep the peace or make sure that the treaty was honored. And I think he might have been there in that kind of capacity, maybe. haven't learned yet how he met my grandmother specifically, but the story is that he actually was there to date or to go out with her sister, her older sister, and because she was 17. And I don't know how old her older sister was. I haven't found anything about the older sister. I've only found stuff about the younger sister. But her name was Roberta. This is all according to my grandmother, because I haven't found anything about her yet. But my grandmother said she had an older sister, Roberta, that James came to date her, but her mother didn't think that was a good fit or something, and said, no, you can't date her, but you can date this daughter. And that was my grandma Elena. So apparently my grandpa was okay with that, because he thought she was prettier, or he thought she was more voluptuous. I'm not sure exactly what the deal was, but that's just rumors that I've heard. I have no way to know that, but they ended up, I guess, seeing each other, and she must have gotten pregnant pretty quickly, because just looking at the dates, like when marriage certificates were filed. So the things that I have are things that I have because my grandmother kept them, and then my dad, after she passed away, my dad kept them. So I was able to scan all of these documents. I think I showed you, or I sent you, like the certificado, basically the marriage certificate. I can't speak this stuff. I just learned from listening to you. It was commune,
yeah.
Commune. I've always said commune. That's just totally a different thing. And then, so that is written in that fancy script, and then you can see where at some point it was typed, maybe on different or different stuff. I'm sure you'll have that too. So I don't know where I'm not seeing it right now, but yeah, the marriage certificate, and then the birth certificate. So the birth certificate, it definitely looks like, according to the date, it was February 28th, 1947. So and the marriage certificate was like around the same time. So they must have had to go and get all of these documents officially done, because they didn't do it officially, like right when you're born, I guess, like a certificate, like if you of needing proof. Because I asked my grandmother one time, because I was trying to find out, like, if I go there, because I always wanted to go to Trieste to see where she lived, where she was born, where she went to church, everything. Because she never wanted to go back, and she didn't really talk much about it, and you could kind of tell that she didn't ever elaborate too much. So I feel like when she came here, she really tried to just put all of that behind her and become an American. Because she took his last name, for example. Whereas now I learned that that's not typical, that that the wife takes the man's last name, and she did that when she signed whatever stuff she had to sign to come into the United States. But basically, what is it? It says here, I have a registry certificate number, Municipality of Trieste Civil Registry Office, birth certificate. The civil status officer of the Municipality of Trieste certifies a peer in register of birth certificate of the year 1929, part ... the Series Act number 1484. So I'm hoping, like, knowing these numbers will help me if I end up finding something and there's like numbers, like from this serial act number to this serial act number, like knowing it's 1484 might help me not have to go through thousands,
Yeah, well, it should. What I find fascinating about the whole story was that, so your great grandparents or your great grandmother, whatever, that they accepted your grandfather. Sounds like pretty readily, yeah.
Well, I honestly, I think when I've been decoding or translating a lot of letters from her younger sister and her brother. Brother moved to Australia, and he, in one of his letters, he talks about how he hasn't seen her since 1947, and he has such warm memories of Jimmy. They called him Jimmy, I guess, which I've never heard anybody call him Jimmy. But in all, and they spell it with a G, which
Well,
is
yeah. Well,
funny.
there's no J in. There's
I
no
didn't know
J.
that. I found that
There's no
out
J
too.
in
About
Italian.
only 21 letters in this alphabet. Okay, that makes sense. And then that he had warm memories of him, and that and I guess the only thing I could think of, it was such a tumultuous time of there that they just, I think that her mother just was like, go to America and start a new life for yourself here. We don't know what's going to happen with this country. You know, World War II was over, but it still wasn't as much over for them as it was maybe for everybody else. It dragged on a little bit longer. And I mean, I want to say, just looking at it from that point of view, that she was wanting to do what was best for her children, you know, by saying, you know, you can go and start a new life and whatever. But my grandma's story was always that she didn't get along with her mother, and that her mother wanted to get rid of her. So because she told me that her last few years, she lived with her grandmother. Like she didn't even live and wasn't raised by her mother, because they didn't get along. They were very like opposite or something. And so she was named after her grandmother, which is, her grandmother's name's Elena. And I found a picture of her headstone with the dates of her birth and date and death and her last name. I think that's what got really confused me, and why I was like, oh, well, that makes sense, because they don't take the husband's name. Because I thought, if her last name was Zucca, which I guess means pumpkin in Italian. So I don't know if he was a pumpkin seller, a grower, a farmer. So his name was Mario Zucca. I haven't found any evidence of a middle name anywhere on any paperwork. Which, is that common that they don't have middle names?
Yeah, you know, yes and no. What's interesting about, I mean, some, you know, a lot of the women, there's always a Maria thrown in there, you know, or something like that. But
My grandma had one.
yeah, typically, I think it could go either way. Now,
Really?
my dad's mother's family, because they came from a noble family. My great grandmother has like 10 names strung together.
Well, I think nobility, they wanted to add every
She's
relative in
got,
there.
and saints and people from the Bible. I mean, it's everybody and his brother is in this. But I don't understand. I don't know why. I don't know why. But
My grandma's middle name was Italia.
oh well, that was my aunt's name was Italia,
Oh,
and you
really?
didn't dare. You did not dare say Italia. She would kill you if you.
Wow.
She went by Dolly.
Okay, but her first name was Italia.
Her first name was Italia.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. This was her middle name, so
Oh, that was
she didn't mind. So his name was Mario Zucca. Her mom's name was Aurora, and I guess it's pronounced Gurin, Gerin. And so that's why I have their information, because it's on the birth certificate. Like,
see, now that sounds like a German name, which doesn't Austrian, which doesn't surprise me,
yeah,
because the Austrian
yeah.
Empire.
Well, and even looking at her picture, did I send you her picture too?
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. She looks like she could be either way, but you're right. Gurin sounds definitely
It's
not
either
Italian.
German or Austrian or something like that. Which,
Yeah.
again,
Well,
it's not a surprise.
yeah, considering that the Austrian, what is it,
The Austrians ran Trieste in the north
for like a
Piedmont,
couple hundred years, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe that's why I can't find any record of her, because I'm not looking in the right area, because she wasn't born in Trieste, but I think Mario was, because I want to say that my grandmother made it sound like her family had lived there for a long time. She said her dad was a ship captain or a merchant marine captain, and he was gone a lot too, I guess, being a captain of a ship. She didn't have any details about the names of any of the ships. She said the last time she saw him, he came to San Francisco on a ship, I don't know if it was his ship or a different ship, to see her and to meet his grandson, meet my dad. And my dad was only like 4 or 5 years old, and he doesn't have a really like strong memory of it. I guess he spent maybe a week there. and I guess my dad had really pretty long curly locks or something like that, and he took him to a barber shop and got it like a military haircut style. My grandma was so mad at her dad for doing that because she loved his hair. And you can actually see in pictures of him, like, okay, obviously this is after he met his grandfather, because his hair is so different than what it usually looks in other pictures. There's a story, as my dad tells me, his grandfather brought him a monkey, but it never made it out of quarantine. So like as a pet, like, oh, I'm gonna bring my grandson a monkey. Maybe he picked one up somewhere on his adventures. But we don't know what happened to the monkey. Didn't make it out of quarantine. If it's true, I don't know. I just think that's a really odd thing to bring your grandson a monkey.
Well, that was a long time ago. People, I think he was a ship's captain. Who knows what else he was picking up along the way, right?
Exactly.
So I have to ask you, because does your father, or did he talk about what it was like growing up, late 40s, early 50s, being half Chinese, half Italian? I mean,
Oh,
Italians weren't looked upon as real Americans at that point in time as it was,
yeah. So basically, I remember him telling me, because my dad also joined he joined the Air Force after college, I think, and he said that his nickname used to be, and it's offensive, but Chingwap. So basically Chinese Italian, like, and I didn't, and I remember thinking, why is that a insult? Like, that doesn't sound like a derogatory term. But then it was explained to me later on, well, this is what they call Chinese people, and this is what they call Italian people. And I'm like, why do they call Italian people? I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense. And I'm sure
they had a lot of names for Italian people back then.
Yeah. So that was his nickname. But my dad is he comes from a really, like I want to say it's in the blood that he's like the strength or the resiliency of the lineage, everything from my great grandmother in China. I mean, she was like one of the first women to graduate university in China I can't remember the name of the university, but I have it written down somewhere. And where back then women didn't get educated, and she I guess her mother was a doctor, so maybe it was her mother that was the first, but they all went to college, like they were educated. And then they went through a lot, like on that side of the family, the Chinese side. When I researched that, because I really have to research it all separately, because the only thing that brings them together is James and Elena in Italy during the war, and I know that my grandmother said that when she came here to the United States, they basically landed in New York. They made their way all the way to the Bay Area where his family was. She didn't speak very, very much English, and they spoke English and Chinese. Actually, I think all of him and his siblings were sent at some age to China to live with their aunt and learn how to speak and write Chinese. And then they, like a couple years later, they would come back. I think James came back, I think maybe because one of the wars was something was going on, and they were like, bring him back. So
maybe in the end of the Korean War or something like that. Korea,
well,
yeah.
like I said, he was born in 25.
Well, it was a big. I mean, obviously, there's big revolutions in China and stuff like that.
Yes,
too, so
yes,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of orphans over there. The Tim Shum, the one that I thought was my great grandfather, I think he might have been an orphan, because nobody seems to know anything about that side of the family. They know more about the great grandmother's side, May. Her name was May. They know more about her side of the family than they know about his. So I would think that if you were a pastor going to spread Christianity to China, you would go to orphanages, right? And convert them and get them over here. And basically what they loved about it is that he could preach to other Chinese Americans, that were in the country, and Chinese people kind of trust each other. They don't trust other people, but if you're a Chinese person and you're telling me something, I'm more apt to believe you, sort of thing. So, and I found that to be a big part of like the success I think that my family had, was they stuck with their people in Chinatowns, wherever they lived, and they built relationships, and people trusted him because he was a pastor. And my grandmother taught Chinese school, or my great grandmother May, she had several Chinese schools in Berkeley, in Oakland, in Berkeley area, back in the, I guess, 40s and 50s, maybe even 60s. She did I don't know, she had boarding houses. She was always about doing something to make money. I think during the war, when James was in Italy, she actually had to close her school, and she went to go work at a parachute factory to, and then I think she did a lot of stuff. I mean, she did whatever she had to do. She had a bunch of kids she needed to support. And basically the older children would help raise the younger children, because mom had to work and dad was, well, Tim Shum actually passed away in 1940. So she ended up remarrying again, but she didn't have any more kids with anybody else. She had all her kids with the Reverend. So they, my dad does have a lot of really good stories. Ironically, my dad's here right now. He flew in last night. He's been playing tennis since, I don't even know. I guess James played tennis, was really big into tennis. And so when he was 16, because they divorced, my Elena and James divorced when he was like maybe four or five. And she left him, and basically she didn't have anything. She couldn't even really take my dad with her, but she needed to get away. And so she just got in her car and she just drove. This is what she's told me before. She just drove until she couldn't drive anymore. And she ended up in Riverside, California, from the Bay Area. So quite a drive. And the first place she stopped to get food, she asked them if they were hiring, and they were. And so she worked at a car hop, like in Riverside during the 50s. And I think I sent you one of those pictures too. She worked at a place called Ruby's.
Yeah.
And she ended up, I guess she explained her situation, and they ended up letting her live above the restaurant or above the car hop. And maybe that was part of her pay. Pay was a place to stay. She had a car, and then she got food because she was working at a car hop. And so she was saving up money so that she could go back and get her son. At some point, and I'm sure they weren't technically divorced yet, or when she left, because I don't know how all that worked back then. But eventually she went back up and got him and brought him back. And then he didn't really see my grandfather until he was 16. And then when he was 16, he started spending the summers up there with his Chinese side of the family. So he didn't have a lot of, they all remembered him, and were just had adored him as a child, and were thrilled to have him come back and visit. And so he had all these aunties that would just dote on him, and even Grandma May, or his Grandma May, my great grandmother, would, they just adored him because he was the only boy that because James remarried eventually, and then had several daughters. And I kind of forgot to go back to this part of it, but yeah, so we were talking about what it was like. But so my great grandmother did not like my grandmother. She wanted James, her son, to marry a Chinese woman, and not a Chinese woman from America, Chinese woman, but
Chinese woman.
Like, go and get one from China and bring her back, like with a matchmaker or something like that. That was part of the plan according to the lore, was to, okay, go there, learn how to speak and read Chinese, hopefully find a bride, and then come back, right? Well, he never found anybody he liked there, so he didn't bring a bride back.
And there's a lot of women over there. He couldn't find anybody like.
I honestly, I think he was I've heard him described as a lover of women. I don't think he wanted to settle on just one woman, So, he basically came back, and then he joins the army, and then goes to Italy and comes back with this Italian bride who doesn't speak any Chinese, doesn't speak any English, and she was like, "What the heck did you do?" But clearly, she was 8 months pregnant when she got to the United States, and so she had the only son, so she wasn't popular with my great grandmother. According to my grandmother, she said that she would go around the house sometimes saying Chinese should marry Chinese and Italians should marry Italians, and then that's all she'd say. She'd just walk by and say, like, make a comment like that.
Wow.
And so she wasn't well received, but her new sister-in-laws all loved her because she was about their same age, and they thought she was great. But she wasn't what my great grandmother had envisioned for her son, so she wasn't happy. Now, later on, when he remarried and then had just daughters, and he did remarry a Chinese woman, then all of a sudden my grandmother became the cat's pajamas because she had a boy. so she was like, I couldn't win with them. I mean, it was like I was the worst, and then I was the best, and then I was like, I don't care. So but my dad just got a lot. He's very personable. Like, just growing up, all the stories I've ever heard about him from his Chinese side of the family was that he was just such a nice and good kid. Like, he didn't get into trouble generally. He was polite, and he was he didn't, like, I think a lot of it had to do with being raised by a single mom for most of his life. He was the man of the house, so he didn't want to add any more stress and burden to his mother, so he did well in school. He played sports. He ended up doing very well in tennis. I think he went to college probably and got I think a scholarship with tennis. He played tennis in the Air Force, and that's how he met my mother, was on the tennis court in Thailand. So tennis has, like, brought my family together in very, like, auspicious ways. My mom.
No, was he in Thailand during Vietnam?
Yes. Yeah. So when he was in Thailand, he met his war bride. Yes. So it very, I don't know, just the way history repeats itself. And my mom was a former champion of Southeast Asia in tennis. So I've got pictures of her getting trophies from the king of Thailand. And and even when she goes back now, like, my parents go back to Thailand, fairly regularly. I think they have a condo there in Hoi Hin, and she's like a mini celebrity over there. Like, everybody knows who she is. Like, especially if they know anything about tennis, which tennis back then, I think, it's still popular there, but it's I don't know. She's like I said, they treat her very well whenever she's there. And I'm always like, who are you? So strange that everybody knows who you are, and they just, dote on you like that. I don't imagine it'll be quite the same experience when I get to go to Trieste, and I'm trying to convince my father to go with me, and maybe my sister too.
And your father, he's never been.
No. So this is the other thing that was really interesting. Why I was saying that I think my grandmother wanted to just put it behind her. Eventually, my dad, once he came back from the war, obviously had my mom, and my mom was pregnant with my sister, and they lived in the Bay Area too, and they got a house there. I was born in Mountain View, California. My sister was too. And I guess the story is, eventually he asked my grandmother, do you want to go back to Italy? Do you want to go back and see your family in your hometown? everything. And she'd always say, nope, nope, I want to remember how it used to be, which was during the war. So I imagine, I mean, she would talk about air raids and, things like that.
But you have to have cousins there because she's the only one who
Oh,
came, right?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and I've got all these letters from her sister, and I found that her sister, I guess it's Lia. So is it Leah or Leah? Probably, right? Leah sounds Italian.
They would say Leah, I think, yeah.
So Leah Zucca is the only one that my sister started corresponding with her back in like the late 1980s, I guess, because the letter that I have that is the furthest back is from November 29th, 1989. And there was a big translation issue, I guess. And I still don't know how well this is translated. It basically says, I hope you excuse us if we haven't replied earlier to your greetings as we were waiting for, it says Lisa, but it might have been Leah, to translate, which I don't think she could have translated. So maybe it's somebody named Lisa. And only now have we managed to respond. I send you our heartfelt greetings. I am the sister of your late grandfather. Like I said, and my name is Livia. So I don't know if that's all translated correctly because of the handwriting stuff. The language barrier prevented us from understanding you earlier, but now that we have managed, I am writing you. Your dear grandmother often mentioned you and Stephanie. Even though we don't know you personally, if you ever come to Italy, be sure that you will be warmly welcomed with much love. I am certain you will feel at home here in your grandmother's homeland, where everyone loved her deeply and has never forgotten her. I prefer to end here with a big kiss to you, your husband, and Stephanie. We think of you often, and even though we are far apart, you are always in our hearts. Hugs and kisses to everyone from your loving relatives, and from me, a big hug and kiss. And then it's signed Tia Livia, this one, but everything else is signed. I have signed as Lia. So I don't know. And then the next one was in 1990, but there's all of these. I'm gathering a lot of information from these translations to help me in my fact finding. So I have found out the name of her two kids. Leah had a son named Mauro, Mauro, which is, am I saying that right? Mauro?
Yeah, Morrow, yeah.
And then a daughter named Patrizia.
Mhm.
And then Mauro married a woman named Barbara. And they had one child, I think, named Andre or Andrea. That one's translation is hard too. And then I guess Patrizia's husband died of a tumor or of cancer, but she had two sons named Daniel and Dennis. And I think that's all I've really gotten from these letters, but I don't know any last names of them because, like, well, obviously, well, no, Mauro would have had his father's last name, so it wouldn't have been Zucca. And then Patrizia, well, she would have had, no, wait a minute, she would have had her father's last name too, right?
Yeah.
That's what's very confusing, is trying to figure out. And she doesn't ever write their last names here. Like, she just writes Mauro and Barbara and Andrea, which it says Figlio, so it says son. And then Patrizia has Dennis and Daniel, and it says Figlii, and then which equals children, which is so helpful, by the way. The people in the group that have helped me translate this stuff. I'm trying to figure out how to get Chat GPT so that I can translate these on my own. Because the handwriting is what is throwing
the
off.
Handwriting is hard, especially when you start looking at some of those older records and stuff. But you have to go. I mean, you have to go. You'll love it. You'll love it when you get there.
Yeah. And I'm so curious though to find out, like, because my grandmother told me she was born at home. Because I remember asking her what hospital she was born in. And she goes, hospital? I wasn't born in a hospital. I was born at home. And I was like, why were you born at home?
Everybody was.
She goes, only poor people went to the hospital. I'm like, poor people went to the hospital? You think it would be the opposite? She's like, no, you had a midwife, or you had, like it wasn't this. And I think she even said somebody would go and tell somebody that, hey, my mom just had a daughter. This is her name. And where they live or whatever. And somebody would just write it down somewhere. And then you know, like I said, they didn't have official birth certificates to mail out to you or to give you unless you needed it. Because if you stayed there and never left there, why would you ever need a birth certificate? Right?
No,
I guess.
I mean, my cousins were born there. They don't, and they told me actually that, they might send, an 8 or 10-year-old to the commune to say my mother had a child and this was the date, and so the birth dates and stuff like that are sometimes suspect. Because
Yeah.
it could have been a few days after the kid could have gave the wrong date, the wrong time,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Just forgot something on the way there. A little
Yeah,
detail that's
exactly.
important. That is funny. So yeah, so I don't know what part, because there's all these zones of Trieste back then of what, because of the war and because of the treaty. I do have an address that I use Google Map on, and it looks like they were only like 8 minutes from what is that big area over there that's really popular? The unity of something. I don't remember what it was. I guess there's a famous area. Like if you see a picture of it, you'll recognize it because it's a lot of movies and things like that will have been filmed there. And it's supposed to be, I've learned that it's the coffee capital of Europe. And there's like over 50 coffee shops there. And some of them have been there since the 1800s. I'm just learning so much about that area. And I guess what I'd like to do, I would love to see if I can figure out a way to do a cruise that ends up there, because I guess it's a pretty major cruise.
Yeah,
Port.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I know there are cruises around Italy, but I don't know. I
Well,
don't know about Trieste.
one of my Chinese side of the family aunts said that she was there like last year. This is before she knew that that's where my grandmother was from. And because she went on a cruise out of there. And then I think I heard somebody else saying that they went on a cruise and they ended up there at the end of the cruise. So like, I think it'd be cool to be able to end up there,
Yeah.
start a cruise somewhere and then end it in Trieste, and then be able to explore and check out. But the Google map is really interesting. So I typed in the address where a lot of these letters came from, and it's not like, it's like a building, and I guess it's got a number, but I don't know, it's their address system is or the way that they put addresses together aren't like we
Well,
do.
they put the street and then the number. They do it the
Yeah,
opposite of
yeah.
us.
So it's
Yeah,
like
they do it the opposite.
via d uh oh gosh, I can't even pronounce it, but whatever it is, Sonosi, and then it says on some of the letters it says 42/1, and then some of them it's the same address but it says 44. So like, I don't know if they've moved around within that building, how many residents are in the building. It's an old looking building, just according to the Google map. You know how you can do a 360 view of the street and everything. So it's weird to me to think, oh wow, that's where my family, I don't know if they still live there, because the last correspondence we have, like I said, the earliest one came from 1989, and the last one that I have is from 2004. And so I think that it's possible that between Mario and Leah, they passed away after 2004, because even some of the last letters she writes about how she's not doing well, she's lost all her teeth, she's got diabetes, and maybe some heart problems, I'm not sure. But I want to connect with, I don't even know if Mauro and Patrizia are still alive, but their kids got to still be alive. I just don't know, and I just haven't been able to find anything. I'm trying to do as much research as I can here, and then know what I need to do when I get there, so that when I get there, I'm efficient with my time and going to the right places, and they're all open and they're not closed on that day or whatever. Yeah. I'm trying to learn from the other things I've heard from your guests that they've experienced trying to get there, and some of the difficulties that they've had. But I really want to get my dual citizenship, but I'm running into that whole 1948 rule, because my dad was born in 1947.
47, right? Yeah.
So and it's the maternal side too. So I don't know if how that would work, like how we could, or how I can get around that, because I think there is a way around it, but you have to go through it judicially.
Well, yeah, you would have to go through, you probably have to go through an attorney. I'm working through an attorney now because I can't wait for the consulate. And
Yeah.
plus if you do it through an attorney, you could do everybody in the line at the same time.
Oh yeah, like my sister. Well, and so but I think would it be easier though if my dad started the process and then just added us kids, or like him, because I have a sister.
Well, probably, yeah. If because the more that you do and the closer you are to the line, the probably the easier it's going to be.
Yeah, less
Uh,
paperwork, I would imagine.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I could have you talk to um Arturo, who's doing mine, and they do a free consultation, so they would.
Oh, you know what? Actually, that'd be awesome, because there's a lot of people out there
And
offering to do it.
he's up in that area too. He's
Okay.
up in that area. So,
Oh,
um,
good. Yeah, definitely share that information with me, because I haven't
um,
found anybody that I'm like, I don't know if it's a scam, because I'm sure there's lots of scams out there where they'll take your money and you'll never hear from them again.
yeah, no, they're really, really good. And
Okay.
I got him through somebody that I know in Sicily who uses him,
Okay,
and
good, good.
like I said, they'll talk to you. They'll send you a a thing to fill out and put all, who's married to who and all of that kind of stuff. And it's uh but like I said, the good thing is you could do it. You could do it all. You have kids? You have kids?
Yeah, I have two sons.
Yeah, so you could do yours, and they could, if you go through the council, you can't do it that way. But if you go
Yeah,
through an
yeah.
attorney, they could do the whole
That's
line. And I'm doing it mainly for the kids because they're in their 20s, and you know,
yeah.
if you ever want to go to school there or live there or anything else, it's just great to have the citizenship.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize some of those benefits. Honestly, for me, my husband and I are talking about get it. Well, and well, I guess if can get mine, then he's married to me. Then it would be by marriage. He could be a dual citizen too, or no?
You can, but you have to know a certain amount of
Italian.
the Italian language. If you're
Well, I'm already
blood,
starting to learn.
if you're blood, you don't need to know anything. You don't even know
Okay.
this arrivederci. You don't know nothing.
Uh,
But if
well,
you're the spouse, you have to know some Italian.
okay. Well, that's good. I mean, because we're talking about. I mean, he's going to probably retire in about 5 years, and I said I would love to, not necessarily. I don't know if I want to like buy a place and like live and retire there like that. I might, but I want to at least go and like, rent something and spend a couple years there to really
Mhm.
immerse myself, and then make that decision at that point. Or we might want to say, hey, let's go to Switzerland, or let's go to, my husband's part Swedish, so he might want to go to Switzerland or Sweden. There's so much to do. You have the whole
Well,
UK.
and as long as is Sweden in the EU? I'm not
Oh,
sure.
oh, I don't know. I
I'm
would
not
think
sure,
so.
but once you have, if you have the Italian passport, you have the EU passport, you could go anywhere.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's like I just want to,
I
in
mean,
my retirement, I want to travel and I want to see things that are older than 200 years.
you
you
have
know.
things that old in California. They have things 200.
Well, yeah, most of it's been like I live in I actually live in Minnesota now.
Oh,
My
you're in
family,
Minnesota.
yeah, my dad lives in Arizona, and most of my Chinese side of the family lives in still lives in California, LA, Bay Area. But it's not it's I really want my dad to go back to Italy. I want him to get to experience this, and he's still vibrant. I mean, he still plays in tennis tournaments across. That's what he's doing here. He's flying to New Jersey to play in a seniors tournament because he's ranked in his age group for tennis.
Oh, wow,
So
that's great.
he's
That's
he's
super.
very active. There's not a lot that sometimes he's more active than me, and I'm like, Dad, you need to
Yeah,
sit
yeah.
down.
If there's no other reason to go, you have to go because of the food.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my grandmother, oh, she would cook finoki. I don't know if they call it, if you know what that is, but my favorite thing that she introduced me to was finoki. It's basically is anise, fennel, I guess maybe
Fennel,
you would probably
yeah,
fennel. And she
yeah.
would make this fennel salad, and we still, like, my dad will go and buy like a case of it at a grocery store or something like that, and we'll chop it up and put a little olive oil, salt and pepper in there, and it's delicious.
We
she
used to,
had,
as a kid, we just used to eat it raw. Fignoc. My mother's dialect would say fignoc. That's the way
oh
they would
yeah,
say
oh
it.
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandma called it finocchi. I don't know. Yeah, dialect
Well,
from.
that's because that's closer to the real Italian. My mother's from the South, so
Oh, okay.
they chop everything off. So we would always say fignoc. But
And
yeah,
everything.
fennel. And there's a place here where you could actually get the sausage with the fennel seed in it. There's if you
Oh,
don't
I've seen that. I've seen
that
that. Oh,
you've never had it
well,
with the fennel seed?
um, if I did, I don't remember, but I know I would love it because I love Italian sausage. Any kind of like, I mean, my grandmother I would spend a couple of weeks every other summer. My sister and I would take turns growing up when we were kids, and we would spend it with my grandmother. And I remember going. This is her when she still lived in Riverside. She had an Italian, uh, what do you call it, like deli, I guess,
Mm.
that she would go to that was just in this really weird part of town. It was like dark in there. It smelled terrible. I just remember thinking when I would go in there when I was little that the smell in this place is icky. And she would buy like, Coca-Cola, mortadella, prosciutto, salami, and blue cheese and French bread. And we would just make, it was so good. I mean, I don't know if that place is still around, but I can't find that kind of deli anywhere anymore. At least not in Minnesota.
They've actually opened up a really good chain here. They started with one and now there's like 5 of them. That's
And you're in New
kind
York,
of a
right?
throwback. I'm in New Jersey. Well,
He's very.
Stephanie, this has been fascinating. I mean, I love the stories. I love the connection, the Chinese Italian connection.
Oh
That's like
yeah.
just a super thing to be. And
I feel like I should write a book because there's
yes, you
so much.
should. No, you definitely should. You definitely should. Why not? I
I
wrote
know.
one. I didn't know what I was doing, so
Yeah, yeah. Well,
um
thank you for taking the time, and hopefully I can get some more information. I'm sure if I can get there, I'll find more information. I'm just brushing up on trying to learn as much Italian as I can right now before I go there. And hopefully, just according to these letters, they are just like, please, we'd love to see you. We missed you. We missed your grandmother, which, I mean, obviously she's passed away now, but they beg her to write to them in almost every letter. Please ask your grandma, ask Elena to write, just drop us a line, let us know she's okay. And she apparently maybe did it like once or twice, but not very much. And it's like they don't understand. Like, why doesn't she want to keep, like, why are we hearing from you, her grandchildren, but not from her? And I just imagine she just doesn't like to go. She didn't like going back there in her mind because it was hard,
yeah, no, I'm sure. I think that's probably part of it.
Yeah.